Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Soya and Bela's World. We have a very interesting program for you tonight. It's going to be a little different because Bela decided everybody's plugged into the news continuously, and she thought that rather than harp on what's going on here in the States with President Trump or overseas in Israel with President Trump and with Bibi, which I will speak about momentarily just briefly, Bela has decided we're going to talk about something that's sort of apropos to everybody out there, and that has to do with nutrition, diet, exercise, something related and something good that everybody can use. So on that count, I'm going to ask Bela, if you don't mind, be kind enough to introduce our guest on that before I give my little 3-minute news roundup, okay? Please.
Oh, sure. Thank you, Bumi. Americans are obsessed with thinness, yet statistically, two-thirds of Americans are overweight, something that we know, we see it. The obsession goes so far that there are women who will buy clothes a few sizes too small on the perchance that they will lose weight to fit into them
Who
or
doesn't?
as an incentive to lose weight. Yet, for those who need to lose weight, the struggle is sometimes lifelong. And we have a very special guest today to talk about how what we believe is adequate food portion. And in fact, what is too much, and where the calories in the foods we enjoy and think are healthy are in fact hidden. Lisa R. Young, PhD, RDN, CDN, is an internationally recognized nutritionist,
How about we
portion
just cut it?
size expert.
Bela, let's just say Dr. Lisa Young. How's that? Doctor, is that
Absolutely.
good?
And wait, but it goes more than that. She's an adjunct professor of nutrition at New York University. Dr.
Oh,
Young is the author of Finally Full, Finally Slim, and the Portion Teller, and the Portion Teller Plan. Dr. Young has been counseling clients for nearly 3 decades and inspires her community to make healthy food and lifestyle choices. Lisa, welcome to Soya and Bela's World.
Thank you
welcome.
so much for having me. Thank you
It's
Of
an
guys for
course.
honor
having
for us.
me.
It's an honor for us, Dr. Young. Now, as I said before, just before we get started, and ladies and gentlemen, stay with us because this is going to be a very interesting segment. Dr. Young is going to talk about various diets and adjustment to illness and how to treat different things and how to deal with different things from a holistic and natural point of view. But um, as a matter of course, we always talk a little bit about what's going on in the world. Let me just briefly say a lot of people, Bela, Soya, Dr. Young, have been talking about what apparently was Trump's decision to pressure Israel into this deal in which a very limited amount of actual hostages are exchanged for a great number of monsters. And, this is a very tough situation. The scale is a very unique and unprecedented scale in as much as to those of the Jewish faith and probably those of the Christian faith as well, the Judeo-Christian heritage. We value life and are willing to give almost anything just to save the lives of the very, very few, whereas those of the extreme Islamic faith, the extremists, at the very least, believe that actually value more the anti-life as opposed to life. I don't want to use the other word, but the anti-life as opposed to life. Let me just give you my take on why Trump apparently pushed this deal. Around the turn of the 20th century, about around 1900, I don't remember exactly when, we had a president by the name of Theodore Roosevelt. Theodore Roosevelt had once said, "Speak softly and carry a big stick." That's a quote. And I don't mean to sound pedantic, but I do very strongly agree with that. Donald Trump, and I love Donald Trump, and I think he will be excellent again, and I think he may be even better now than he was the first time around, is one of the best presidents we've seen in his first term. But nevertheless, he does the opposite, or he does differently. He speaks very tough. He comes out with things and he says things right into your face. And unfortunately, in this particular case, he meant well, but what he had said was basically was that heaven help you to the terrorists if the hostages are not freed by the time I am sworn into office. That's essentially what he said. What did he mean by that? I don't know, but I assumed that he assumed that the tough talk would be enough to scare them into making a fair deal in terms of releasing the hostages, or as many as could be so. Nonetheless, it did backfire to a certain extent because Trump's words were very strong, but he, practically speaking, did not have with what to back up those words. We could not, and he would not, and I don't think we should or have to at this point, put American troops on the ground. Nor would we accomplish anything by putting more American troops on the ground into Gaza. What would he do? He would lay waste to Gaza without considering the so-called innocent civilians. And again, I say so-called because the vast majority of them support Hamas and have demonstrated that support now, beforehand, and on release of the hostages. But that being aside, the so-called innocent civilians, Trump could not just wipe what was clean, the rest of Gaza clean, and just destroy everything. So that's one thing he could not do. Sanctions do not scare them because at this point he couldn't do any directly sanction them. He could direct sanctions, which he will anyway, only against those, the head of the snake, so to speak, Iran, Qatar, if maybe, or certain countries that are sponsoring the terrorism that's been going on. So there was really very little that Trump was in a position to actually do in terms of in order to carry out anything that would back up the threat that he had made. And so Donald Trump, being who he is, could not simply back down. He needed to impress upon Israel or push Israel into doing some sort of a deal which would effectively get him off the hook and be able to say, hey, now there's a deal, something happened, we're getting some hostages released, but a few at a time, and there's going to be, something going on. There'll be a second stage and a third stage. So he doesn't have to take any kind of action, which he could not take anyway. That's my particular view. Bela, Dr.
Okay,
Young,
thank
Soya.
you. Thank you for your commentary. Okay. Lisa.
I'll stick with nutrition.
Absolutely,
Had a
absolutely.
different battle of the bulge.
The question is, do we really need to fill an entire plate with food to feel full? Or know that we have eaten enough. I mean, I remember as a child, if I didn't finish what I was eating, my mother of blessed memory would say, you just had 2 bites. That's it. You're done. Just 2 bites. So, as a portion size researcher, how much is really enough?
I mean, we fill up the plate because we eat out a lot. And we started eating out probably about 40, 50 years ago, which is around the time portion sizes got bigger. And when you eat out, you don't want to get an empty plate and you'll complain because you're paying for it. So the restaurant that gives the biggest portion wins. And so you get used to this big portion. And then when you go home, you end up thinking that that's a normal size portion. And so what happens is there's a term portion distortion, and it's we adjust what we think is a normal amount of food and it's a bigger plate. Now, if you fill that plate with fruits, vegetables, beans, whole grains, then we don't have a problem. But when we fill it with just junk and so many other things, that's when we have a problem. And that's why we end up eating way too much.
It's interesting. Yeah, I just want to mention, just to touch upon what you said. When you go to a restaurant, you want to have large portions, but I find that the more upscale restaurants, the restaurants that charge a lot of money for their entrees, their portions happen to be much smaller. Also, years ago, the teacups and the coffee cups used to be tiny. Now people are drinking what we call in Yiddish, they're drinking coffee with these big schistles. It's like, it's enough. It's enough. It's enough to feed an entire community, and quench their thirst.
It's true. I mean, we just we've lost sight of what is a portion. And when you go to a fancy French restaurant or a fancy, Israeli restaurant or a fancy Mediterranean restaurant, you don't say, you look at the quality of the food.
Right.
But now we're not looking at the quality of the food. We're focusing on the volume of the food.
The
We don't
Yeah.
even
quantity.
care. We don't even care what it is. Just give us more.
Well,
And
you're right.
we get used to it.
Dr. Young, it's true because I was just the other day at one of my favorite places, and I'm not a fancy person. Mine is just actually Ben's Kosher Delicatessen. And
I know, Ben's, of
yeah, all
course.
right. And I feel good when I walk out of there because I feel I didn't overspend, yet I got a nice, hefty portion that satisfied me more than satisfied me. Whereas when I go to one of these restaurants that Bela's referring to, I walk out feeling cheated.
Exactly.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
I paid them an
Exactly.
arm and a leg, and I'm getting a sliver of that big a portion.
Exactly.
And so you're very, very right on that. How do we combat this sort of these urges? What do you do to take control of yourself because it's so damn hard?
I
How do you?
mean, I don't want to like get into like the weight loss medications, but you have this situation where we overeat, and then you've got 50 million Americans taking the weight loss drugs. So, because the food industry is giving us so much more than we need. So, I think the best way to beat the system is to share a main dish, and it could be big, you share it, and you could order an extra side of vegetables, you could order an extra salad, you could get a
Right.
veggie soup.
Right.
And this
Mhm.
way everybody wins, not the restaurant, but
Right.
everybody wins.
Right.
You know
That's true.
something? Tell that to my mom. Next time we're sharing. We're sharing. We're eating better. We're eating healthier, and we're spending less at the same time.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Makes all.
So,
Yeah.
Dr. Young, there are people that have certain dietary restrictions. For example, is very common, I understand, let's say, kidney disease, CKD. Many people don't even know that they have it. They walk around with their EGFR at a reduced or lower level number than it should be. It's nice to have 50 plus and whatever. It could be in the 30s, 20s, whatever. And you can function happily and normally. But nevertheless, over time, if you don't watch your diet, what are some of the ways? What are some of the things that should be watched more carefully to combat these different kinds of, sort of seemingly benign illnesses that one may be walking around with? So is there a certain category of foods that are better to eat, a certain category of foods stay away from? I mean,
Yeah,
how
so
would
I
you,
think I
right,
think once you have, once somebody has, end stage renal disease, chronic, kidney disease, then they really have to start watching, and they have to eat a small amount of protein, and they have to watch their potassium, their phosphorus. It becomes a whole thing.
okay,
But I think also, and it's more common in people who have diabetes. So, and so many people have diabetes. So
right,
one of the simple things, without sitting here feeling like you have to write everything down, is to watch the added sugar, to limit that added sugar from soda, from
right.
iced tea, from sweetened drinks, and also to limit the ultra processed foods from cookies and cakes and white bread products, and also limiting the fried foods. And we could eat schnitzel till we're blue in the face. We eat big steaks, and those kind of foods are problematic. So the added
Right.
sugar, the salt, the saturated fat, those are the ones that are problematic. But at the same time, I like to talk positive. So what could we have, and what could we eat more of? So
Right.
trying to get more fish, more beans, hummus, more greens, salads, colorful vegetables, fruits. And so you don't have to feel like you have to look at an empty plate, but really having more wholesome whole foods and fewer of those ultra processed foods.
You
are
talk
these you?
about the sodas. It's very interesting, but I see people will have, a cake and then drink diet soda. It's like,
Exactly. Yeah, right.
they're decreasing the sugar because it's okay to have like a large piece of cake or a bunch of cookies, but you have a diet soda to go along with it, just to wash it all
Exactly.
down.
Exactly. Or
Diet Coke.
diet
Does it
soda and French
matter,
fries,
Dr. Young, when you say sodas, is there a difference between a colored soda, a Coca-Cola, whatever, a colored soda, as opposed to like seltzer? Is
Oh,
that is
seltzer is not a
No, seltzer
soda.
is water. It's
So
carbonated water.
seltzer
That's
is
fine.
just water with carbon dioxide. And that's totally fine. So
that's
for
fine?
people who can't drink water because they don't like the taste of it
Hmm.
and they like the fizzle,
Yeah.
what I'll say to them, and if they don't want just plain seltzer, I'll say make ice cube trays, make ice cubes out of soda, and you could put a couple of those
Interesting.
ice cubes into your seltzer so it gives you the flavor that you like.
So in
That's a
other
Um,
great
words,
idea.
it gives
freeze
them something.
Coca-Cola into into
Yeah,
little
an
ice
ice cube
cubes
tray. Yeah, that's a
and
great
Yes,
put that
idea.
into the seltzer.
Hmm.
yes. Like I'd rather you put lemon or mint, but for people who are like not gonna really want to do that, you could put a little splash of juice, or you can make ice cubes out of your favorite soda.
And these things are universal. This is regardless of your anybody a person's medical condition. These things are primarily good for everybody. Things that you have mentioned.
Absolutely, absolutely. And just
Absolutely.
like limiting soda is good for everybody because if you limit the added sugar and even the diet chemicals, it's good for reducing the incidence of heart disease, diabetes, cancers. Those are the top leading causes of death. So
Yeah.
why
I,
not? And
I
obesity. And obesity.
I've been drinking a lot of Diet Coke lately.
It's not going
Not
Mm.
to.
good.
It's not terrible if you have one a day. But if you're drinking so many a day, I'd say have one. It doesn't do anything to help people lose weight. It really doesn't. If
No.
anything, I think they end up justifying. That like Bayla said, justifying the sweets because I had a diet soda. So you're better off having one cookie and having a sparkling water.
Hmm.
How about
Yeah.
dairy products such as some of my favorites? Pizzas, pastas with cheeses in it, those kind of goodies.
I'm not one of these people who thinks you have to cut out all dairy. Some people, if they have like a lactose intolerance, then they want to cut out all dairy. But I think it becomes a quantity issue. If somebody loves pizza, have one slice of pizza with a salad.
Hmm. So
If you,
you fill up on the salad, but you're still getting
exactly,
the taste of the pizza because your craving doesn't necessarily have to satisfy your hunger. You just want to satisfy your craving. And if you're hungry, have a salad, which is not going to increase your weight.
So is the
exactly.
salad counterbalancing that pizza, so to speak?
No, but it's filling you up. It's giving
Yeah.
you volume on the plate. And at the same time, I'm not telling you to go into a pizza place and just have a salad, but you
Right.
don't need three slices. One slice. You like the pizza, enjoy it, and have it with a salad.
Right. Right.
What if I top off my pizza or the kind of goodies like if I want to eat a nice juicy hamburger or I want to eat a nice hunk of steak or something? I drink a glass or two of water. Does that help at all? Clean water? Does
Not
that does,
exactly.
it
Not
doesn't does it
exactly.
doesn't dilute it
And
or
I,
dissolve it?
yeah, and I'd say like those big juicy steaks that are like 20-ounce porterhouse steaks. You share that. You get a side of, roasted Brussels sprouts, roasted
Right.
broccoli,
Or
and a
any
salad.
vegetable that you like. Sure.
Exactly.
What about all the new fad diets for losing weight and the people in the ads who claim they are losing weight? Do they actually work?
Any diet that you go on temporarily that restricts calories work. But do they really work? Meaning, do you keep the weight off? No. The only diet that will work in the long term is an eating plan. Like a diet could be like a fad, or a diet could be like a lifestyle plan. So the
Right.
best diet that you could go on is a healthy lifestyle where you cultivate healthy habits,
Hmm.
where you also exercise and you eat more fruits and vegetables. You have whole grains instead of white flour. You make sure to have some protein at each meal. You include plant proteins. You try to see, am I hungry? Am I full? Am I eating standing? And really try to cultivate and develop a lifestyle that's livable for you.
Right. Right.
Because you're saying that these diets they never last. Sooner or later, you break the diet, and if
Well,
you
then you end
cultivate a
up with this.
lifestyle,
You
you
end up
get
with this yo-yo dieting. That's what happens. You either because you're not losing weight, or because you're just sick and tired of limiting yourself. And so yo-yo diet isn't yo-yo Lisa, isn't yo-yo dieting a problem amongst dieters?
Oh, it's a terrible problem. And it's also not only is it a physical issue, it's a mental issue where you feel like there's like a whole emotional roller coaster that goes on. You feel like you're a failure, you're a loser. You're not a failure, you're not a loser. And it's like people want to lose 20 pounds for the wedding in a month. Like when's
Oh,
the last time someone lost 20 pounds? I mean, and they want to lose it in no time.
right.
So they didn't gain it in 1 month, they gained it in a couple of years. So just really but I think people should just forget about the number on the scale and really focus on really creating healthy habits that incorporate exercises and movement that you like, drinking water instead of liquid calories, and really trying to tune inward instead of saying, well, this restaurant gave me this tremendous steak and this oversized pizza pie. I have to eat it because they gave it to me.
And we
Instead,
don't, and God forbid, we don't want it to go to waste.
exactly, exactly. There are people starving in who knows
Yeah,
where.
exactly.
But you have to tune in and say, do I want this? Am I really hungry? And usually after you have one slice of pizza with a salad, you're not hungry.
I think I'm starting to hear you tell me that it's okay for me to leave something on the plate. I don't have to clean the plate and make it look like it just came out of the dishwasher.
No,
It's better.
you don't have to finish everything on your plate. Forget about what you were told when you were a child. It's okay
Exactly.
not
We were
to.
all
Exactly.
told that. My mother used to say, waste not, want not.
Right, right,
Right.
right.
I hear.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Dr. Young, you mentioned exercise as part of this whole healthy lifestyle. Is there an amount of exercise that everybody should do, or does it depend on the person's health and age, and what kind of exercises might be appropriate
First of all, the
for
best
different people?
exercise, and that's a good question. The best exercise to do is the one you're going to do. The best time of the day to exercise is the time that you will regularly do it. But with that, there was just a report out that I saw like in the past day or two that and they recommend 150 minutes a week, which ends up being about 20 minutes a day, give or take, 21 minutes a day.
Really?
And they found that
Bearable.
in older Americans, it decreased by 31%. The morbidity rate of getting certain diseases like heart disease, cancers, diabetes. So just 20 minutes a day.
Just 20 minutes. It used to be they would say 60 minutes a day, an hour a day. Now it's just 20 minutes a day?
It's 100, if you can do 150 minutes a week, and I did the calculator, I said,
Right,
what's
right.
150? And it came to like a little more than 20 minutes, and that will do it. Now,
Oh,
you
my
might skip a
goodness.
day. So if you skip
Doesn't
a
add
day,
up though, because the food portions went up in size.
exactly,
The
exactly.
exercise
The food
went
portions
down.
went up, exactly. But the thing is, when you exercise and you do like the movement, you're tuning into yourself, you end up being less hungry, you end up nibbling less, and you just sort of feel better. So it ends up being not just the exercise calories that are burned, but your whole well-being. You feel like you're more resilient with being able to follow a healthy eating plan.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Young, on the subject of exercise, I have this debate with my mom frequently enough. She usually gets on the bicycle in the house. She has a home, one of these, what do they call these bicycles that you just ride, stationary bikes you exercise on. And she does some walking sometimes to and from work, a few blocks. But she takes her own leisurely pace on the bicycle. She just goes. And I keep saying, Ma, if you don't pick up the pace, if you don't get your heart rate up, if you don't put some steam into it, what's the use? Doesn't seem to be. I don't think you're really getting any exercise. Am I right or wrong? Do you
How
have to
how
actually
old
get?
is your how old is your mom?
Let's just say she's in her 80s,
Well, for someone, I think you have to look at who the person is. You don't
right?
want to overexert,
Right.
and you really have to compare the person to them. So it might be exertion for her. It might not be exertion for you because you're younger, but for her it is, for her it is.
But should there be some reasonable degree of exertion? When I'm exercising, taking a walk should not be enough. I should be walking fast and working up the sweat and getting my heart rate up. doesn't that qualify as exercise? And if I don't do all those things, if I'm just taking a leisurely stroll, am I really exercising?
Well, first of all, a leisurely stroll does count for something. I would try to get the heart rate up by going faster, but I
Uh-huh.
wouldn't say that you have to sweat. You don't, it's not like you have to sweat. And some people sweat and some people don't. So using sweat is not the best metric. But one of the traps that people fall into is they say, well, if I'm not going to get my heart rate all the way up and I'm not going to sweat, it doesn't pay to do it at all. And
That's what I
that's
feel.
and that's see, that's wrong. You work
Wrong.
up to it. You work up to it. So
Right.
maybe a couple of days you go to the gym where you do the sweat and you go on the treadmill on a 12, incline or something. But you don't always have to do that.
I see.
So
So
what is
even
a
even
health?
taking a quote unquote spazier or a
Right.
leisurely stroll
Exactly.
would still qualify as some degree of
Some
exercise.
something. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's
So
something.
so what is a healthy amount of weight to lose in a given time? So for example, if somebody wants to lose say 10 to 20 pounds, how much weight should they lose per week or month to ensure that it stays off? Not just to lose it, but to ensure that it stays off. Because we know that with crash diets, the weight comes back quickly. Like you mentioned, losing 20 pounds in a month. First of all, it's probably physically impossible. But even if somebody loses a large amount of weight, they will gain it back. So, how much can somebody lose and ensure that whatever they're losing is actually going to stay off?
It's going to vary because the heavier somebody is, the more they can lose initially, and it's not necessarily a crash.
Oh,
But
interesting.
1 to 2 pounds for a woman and maybe 2 to 3 for a guy each week.
Per week.
Not necessarily more than that. Now you might lose 4 pounds in a week because it's water weight and then stay the same for 2 weeks. So I feel like I'm not one who believes they should weigh themselves more than twice a week, if they even that much. I think going by how you feel, going by
Yes,
your
Soya?
clothes, I think is such a much healthier way. But for people who really need to check in with the scale, do it at the same time of day, twice a week. Because if you eat Chinese food, you gain 3 pounds, but you didn't gain 3 pounds of fat. You had salt.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Uh-huh.
It's
So
funny
when
you should
people eat
say that about
Chinese,
not checking in because I'm afraid to check in, Dr. Young.
are you saying if somebody eats Chinese food, they will see an increase in the scale by 3 pounds the following
Possibly
day?
easily 2 to 3 pounds. It depends what you ate. If you ate something very salty, you're going to end up holding water, and it's easy to gain weight, but it's water weight, which is why I don't even like on a night that the day after you eat out, even in a restaurant where it's salty, skip the scale.
What
Right.
about blood tests, Dr. Young? Are you allowed? I mean, just the same way you said that if you ate something Chinese and it might result in this salty water weight, as you call it, um, can that affect the outcome of your sugar levels and other things if you took a blood test the very next day after having some big hearty, Chinese meal the day before?
I mean, it could. You should be fast. You should be fasting for certain blood tests. Like if you're doing cholesterol and you're doing sugar, you should be fasting. And
For how long prior to the
just
test?
12. That's just 12 hours. But I
Oh,
wouldn't. I wouldn't. If you ate one big meal, once that week, fine. But if you overate a lot or you were traveling, you might want to wait a week before you get that blood test.
what about after Passover? You spend the week in the hotel, or you spend the week eating matzah and potatoes and eggs, and nowadays you eat pizza and rolls as well.
Right,
So,
exactly.
what
So
about
get a
that?
blood
And
test right
quinoa,
after.
and quinoa too.
Right. So, what about that, Doctor?
I wouldn't go on the scale or have any blood tests or have any big things until at least a week. At least a
That's
week.
that's very reasonable because Soya just whispered into my ear. She just said until next Passover.
Oh, until next
Yeah,
Passover.
well, Dr. Young says at least a week, Soya. That's sufficient.
Yeah,
Hey,
yeah. I'd
hey,
say at least a week.
that's fair enough. Yeah.
Is it okay to use a crash diet to jumpstart the weight loss process?
You could, but I don't see a point of it. I mean, if you feel like you need that motivation to lose something quickly, like you're cutting out carbs, you lose a lot of water, but then once you add back the carbs, the weight loss might slow and it might stay the same, in which case you might get discouraged.
Mhm.
So, it's up to you. I worked years ago at a place where they put them on a 2 to 3 day cleansing period where they gave them low carb and higher in protein to get
Right.
them to lose a lot of weight, to get them motivated to keep going. It could work. It's not going to harm you, but it could
Right.
work the other way also if you start reintroducing the carbs and then you gain the weight back.
Right.
I have two last questions, if I may. I hope I'm not taking too much of your time, Dr.
No, it's fine.
Okay, thank you so much. One is there was a fad in the past. I don't know how common it is today. People had their stomachs tied. You believe if there was anything to that, or it's
Like
not? Is it a very unhealthy?
balloons.
What
They
they
have the
call it?
balloons,
Lap band. The lap band.
the
Well,
lap
there's the
band,
lap band,
or
there's
Yeah, I'm
bariatric.
not a
There's a
yeah.
lot of,
physician.
they're still doing it. There's still the bariatric surgery, but now people are doing the Ozempics and the Wegovy's, but people are still doing the lap bands and the bariatric surgery. And it works for some people great, but there are people who had to do the surgery several times because the stomach, it expanded again.
So
Wow.
it's not a
So
guarantee.
it's not a guarantee. And even if you do these things, you still have to learn how to eat. And one of the biggest problems with the weight loss medications is that they work great while you're on them, but they don't teach you how to eat. You don't have an appetite. And when you go off them, people tend to gain the weight back. And that's where the problem lies.
And you just answered my second question. I was just leading into Ozempic and the new ways and the new fads. So many people that I hear about are taking them, and not for medical reasons. They're taking them
Hmm.
because they want to lose weight fast.
Hmm.
And like you say, if you get off, what about, are they unhealthy in any way? Can they have adverse side effects when you take these various medications to lose weight as opposed to doing it the old fashioned way and dieting and exercise the way you encourage?
I mean, they could have adverse effects. I mean, first of all, it depends on the individual. A lot of people have GI issues, where they're nauseous and diarrhea and constipation. They have a lot of
GI as in
a
gastrointestinal
lot of gastrointestinal.
for our layman audience like myself.
Yes. So a lot of people will have, gastrointestinal issues, digestive issues, I should say.
Okay.
That's the easiest term. And then the other thing is very rapid weight loss does cause protein, lean body mass
Right.
loss. So it's super, super important that you make sure that you eat well and that you eat ample protein while you're on these medications, even if you're not hungry. People often think, "Oh, I'm not hungry. The less I eat, the better." But that's not really the case. So you really want to keep your lean body mass preserved.
It's not
Doc,
for you, it's for your organs. The
Absolutely.
protein is for your organs, for your brain, for your heart, for all your organs. People don't realize that. So they think when you're saying you need protein, it's like you need it. They're not like connecting it that it's for their organs and their brain to function properly.
Dr.
And it's
Young,
it's also a minute. It's also when you lose lean body mass and you lose muscle mass, separate even from organs, you lose muscle mass. What happens is then if you gain the weight back, you have more fat, less muscle. It becomes much easier to keep gaining the weight back because
It's very interesting.
muscle tissue is much more metabolically active tissue, meaning
Hmm.
that it speeds up your metabolism. The more if two people look the same, the one with the muscle is going to have a faster metabolism, meaning they can eat more to
Mm.
burn those calories. So you don't want to lose that muscle. And then, as you're saying, it could become dangerous after you're going into your organs.
What
So if you exercise and you build up muscle, you're going to have a better metabolism.
Absolutely. Hmm.
What about people that have the opposite problem, meaning they're not able to eat? Like, for example, there are people who, when they're stressed, they're those that will, they'll eat everything and anything in sight. And then there are people who, when they're stressed, they completely lose their appetite. They can go an entire day without eating and not feel hungry.
I mean, that's an issue also, because if it's one day, I'm not worried about it.
No, but
But
if it's an
if
ongoing,
it's
something
an
is there's an
ongoing
ongoing
thing,
stressor.
and sometimes they have a lot of anxiety and they're afraid
Right.
they'll have stomach aches and they'll have digestive issues if they eat because they
Or they'll
just
throw up, yeah.
exactly, and that's an issue too. And so eating the bland food, plain food, um, and having just something that you feel like you can tolerate, or small, frequent meals rather than big meals or like mini snacks
Mhm.
is a better way to do it for for those people.
Right.
It's interesting you mentioned the flip side of the coin. It's so
How
important.
could people get in contact with you?
So they could go to my website, drlisayoung.com, and they can email, or they can also email, they can get information from me there, but I'll also give you my email, lisa@drlisayoung.com.
Do you do private?
Repeat that again one more time. Please repeat that again one more time so people know.
My website is drlisayoung.com, and my email is lisa@lisayoung.com. And I do private practice for a wide variety of medical conditions or just general health, weight loss as well. And I do a lot of telehealth also.
Great. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us tonight
My pleasure.
and for sharing your professional knowledge and information that you have treated us to.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you,
It was
Dr.
it was
Young.
a lot of fun. It was great to be on.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for
Okay.
keeping us up.
Okay.
So for Dr. Young, for Bela, for Soya, I want to thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening in. We'll be back with you again in a week to bring you our next show and our next segment. And we're going to try to keep you informed. Like Bela says, we're on a podcast as opposed to a radio show as we used to. So I'm still in the adjustment process. But Bela, you're going to keep teaching me until I get the podcast down pat. Yes?
Absolutely.
Okay. We'll speak to you again next week. Good night, everyone.
All right.
Bye.
Good
Thank you.
night. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Good night.
Good night.